regional inequality in Venezuela. Today we discuss.
Welcome to Venezuela Insider, the only place in Venezuela for expats, digital nomads, entrepreneurs, investors, travelers, and related internationals. For more information, venezuelainsider.com.
One of the running arguments that we have here on the platform is the discussion of the wealth inequality in the country. We already discussed the Gini coefficient in Venezuela is very, very high. At best, Venezuela has one of the top 10 largest Gini coefficient registers in the whole world. And at worst, Venezuela is the most unequal nation in the world, competing with South Africa. However, today, we are not going to discuss about the Gini coefficient in Venezuela compared to the rest of the world. We are going to talk about the different kinds of inequality that we have regionally within Venezuela. Let's start. We already discussed, of course, most of the time that Venezuela suffered an 80% GDP collapse between 2013 and 2018. Of course, we start seeing economic growth since 2021 reflected on GDP numbers. Remember, GDP is a lagging indicator, and Venezuela actually has been growing since 2018. That's when the trend reversed, and of course, we halted during COVID. But afterwards, the Venezuelan economy has been growing steadily on the past few years. We went on this 80% GDP collapse from close to $400 billion US. That was the size of the Venezuelan economy on nominal terms, collapsed until $43 billion US. That's over 80% GDP collapse, reflected on GDP numbers. And of course, that happened during COVID. This low level of economic output was registered during COVID. Of course, that's another thing. And right now, the Venezuelan economy is a little bit over $100 billion on economic output, and we are supposed to grow further another 4%, 5% by late 2024. Now, one of the biggest issues regarding the economic recovery of Venezuela since the past couple of years has been that this particular recovery is an unequal recovery, both on industries and also on regions of the country. So in economics, this concept is known as the K-shaped recovery because it's an unequal growth that we have since, let's say, between 2019 and 2021 that has affected possibly some regions of the country. However, for many regions within the economy, not only that they are not growing, actually they are still stagnated and in some cases still dropping again. And of course, that affects also some industry in the country. We have to talk, when we talk about the Venezuelan economy, we have to talk about the oil economy that has been growing since 2020, but is an unequal growth. So you have the Cantillon effect going on, but also other industries have been growing as well. We can talk about healthcare, professional services, also e-commerce and commerce overall. However, some industries have been lagging as well, and we can mention education and also talk about the banking industry. The financial industry has been stagnated since that collapse. And of course, depending on the industry that is either growing, stagnated, or still dropping, also depends that the location, the particular regional location of each industry. So depending on the industry, also the state in which industry is actually located, well, that depends also the performance on such region regarding economics. So regarding the performance of the Venezuelan economy and recovery on the past few years, the Venezuelan regions of course the country, they are divided on three different groups regarding if they are growing or not. So basically, these two groups are the main group, the one that is actually growing, that includes the central states of Venezuela, that is the capital district of Caracas, Miranda, Vargas, Aragua, and Carabobo. Also, you have to include Lara State, Portuguesa State, you already explained what happened over there, Táchira State, Barinas State, Apure State, and Anzoátegui States. Those are, quote-unquote, the winning states here in the country, depending on their particular industries. Then we have an intermediate group that is neither growing or stagnated, that is the Zulia State, Yaracuy State, Guárico State, Bolívar State, and Nueva Esparta State, aka Margarita Island. And the third group, sadly, this is the lagging group, and is formed by Delta Amacuro, Amazonas, Falcón, Sucre, Cojedes, Trujillo, and Mérida State. Sadly, that's, of course, one of the prettiest states here in the country. Now, let's go why some of these states are winning and some of them are losing. Let's start with the Portuguesa state that actually we already covered. Portuguesa, the dark horse of the Venezuelan economy, is very important regarding agro-industrials. And also you have to add the Lara state. What happens in Portuguesa? Well, Portuguesa is very big regarding food production that, of course, stagnated during the crisis until 2018. Afterwards, what we saw is that right now the food producers, both the farmers but also the industrials, have the incentives in order to further keep expanding their operations. And hence, right now, Acarigua, one of the biggest city, the most important city on Portuguesa, actually has transformed completely on the past few years. And you can see, and this is a very special thing happening in Portuguesa, is a synergy between the public and private sector. We also have to talk about Barinas and Apure State. These states have been growing mightily after the crisis thanks to the livestock on those states. So meat, beef production is important on such places. Also, we have to talk about Táchira. Táchira State is on the west side of the country, neighboring with Colombia. So Táchira is not doing anything particularly special. However, thanks to the border commerce and border trade, has been becoming a little bit more important since the crisis. Also, we have to mention my home state, Anzoátegui, that is very important, of course, for the oil industry, especially the Orinoco Belt. That's where is located the largest oil reserve in Venezuela, that, of course, Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world. Now, let's talk about the lagging group, why these states are not growing, and let's start with Mérida. Of course, Mérida is beautiful. However, the situation with Mérida is very reliant on tourism and services overall. And of course, Mérida was one of the most impacted regions of Venezuela since the crisis. The services and utilities are lackluster. It was heavily dependent on public services like education. In Mérida, you have one of the most important universities here in the country. It's a public university, the ULA, or Universidad Los Andes. Now, what makes each state growing more, further, or keep lagging, keep contracting? Well, it goes state by state. For instance, you have the Falcón state, this is a state that I like a lot. It's beautiful and has a lot of biodiversity, and also has the oil industry, because some of the most important oil refineries, these oil refining facilities, are actually located on Falcón, however, with lackluster results. And also the tourism that should be important on those places within the Falcón state. The performance right now is lackluster regarding economic and touristic activity. We also have to talk about that the private sector in places like Caracas, Miranda, Anzoátegui, and other of the biggest states like, of course, Carabobo and Aragua, the private sector is very resilient, has been more resilient, has more capital, has more infrastructure, and hence they have been able to adapt and shift more to the Venezuelan nuances. Also, one of the factors regarding this particular inequality is the synergy with public and the public and the private sector. And that happens because, for instance, I already mentioned that in Portuguesa, they have a good synergy between the local government and also private institutions. Meanwhile, in some states, the government has a lackluster synergy with the private sector. So that happens, for instance, the good synergy, you can see it on the oil states, except for Zulia, actually. And also, of course, the food producers, regional food producers like Portuguesa, they have good synergy. However, in many states, the synergy is lackluster, and that's why they have terrible macroeconomic output. Also, we have to talk about the tax burden. I explained that in Venezuela, the brick and mortar taxes, they are a nightmare to navigate for many private endeavors, of course. And what happens is that the tax burden, depending on the region, depending on the state, depending on the municipality, is going to be either better or worse. And on the worst cases, the tax burden, especially the local tax burden, the regional tax burden, hinders further economic growth. Also, we have to talk about tourism. Most of the, let's say, middle of the pack states, like Nueva Esparta, aka Margarita Island, what happened on those states that they are very dependent on the service economy, the tourism, and that kind of thing. And of course, that's important. However, is low value added activities and depends a lot on discretionary spending and how the rest of the economy is performing. And lastly, let's talk about a little bit about the mining industry that we have in Venezuela. Is mostly located on the Bolivar state. The issue with mining that at some point, let's say 2015, 2017, it was poised, according to the government, to at least replace, until a certain degree, the oil industry here in the country with lackluster results. We already discussed that the oil industry and the oil economy trickles down to the rest of the economy overall, with both good and bad results, depending on how the oil economy is performing on the first place. However, in mining, it's not the case. The mining industry doesn't do the trickle down to the rest of the economy, and hence is very insignificant in order to elevate economic activity to a particular region. And everything in this particular inequality manifests on the sentiment on each particular citizen, because in many states, the economic growth since the recovery has been either lackluster or non-existent. So for them, the mindset is that we're still on this particular economic dichotomy from 2017 that it was very, very, very bad. However, in places like Caracas or Anzoátegui or Carabobo, you have seen the situation has become exponentially better compared to 2017. Still lackluster, but way better compared to those days. So you have way more supply of goods and services, better public services, better utilities, better access to internet connection, a better high-speed internet connection. Also, you have products from all over the world. And you have more job opportunities, more business opportunities compared to 2017, still lackluster, but they actually feel the expansion on the Venezuelan economy, but still a long way to go.
Thank you for watching Venezuela Insider. Please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on social media. If you want to work with us, VenezuelaInsider.com. Thanks again, and have a nice day.